The Young and the Restless spoilers. The walls of the Newman estate had witnessed many betrayals, but none cut as deeply as the moment Victoria's hand struck across Claire's face, a single, sharp act born not of cruelty, but of unbearable confusion. The letter that had arrived that morning still trembled in her grasp, its edges frayed as though it had traveled through ghosts before reaching her. The signature, written in Cole's familiar hand, carried the weight of finality, a will that seemed to erase the very truth she had fought to preserve. It claimed that Claire was not his daughter, that her existence had been fabricated, a deception buried in the embers of guilt and manipulation. For a heartbeat, Victoria's entire world tilted, and every memory of love, every glance shared across the fragile bridge of reconciliation, shattered into something unrecognizable. She felt humiliated, betrayed, and cornered by the possibility that the daughter she had just begun to love might be nothing but an elaborate illusion. In that blind, trembling moment, she lashed out, her hand striking Claire as if the gesture could silence the storm inside her. The sound echoed across the marble floor like a verdict, severing the delicate thread that had barely begun to reconnect mother and child. Claire's eyes, wide with disbelief, carried the pain of generations, not just of abandonment, but of being unwanted once again. She had come to Genoa City seeking redemption, hoping to atone for her past mistakes, for the dark manipulations of Jordan that had tainted her soul and nearly destroyed the Newman family. Victoria had been her chance at rebirth, the mother she had longed for in every silent night of her fractured life. But that one slap, that accusation, it reopened every wound she thought had healed. Her body trembled as tears began to fall, not from the physical sting, but from the realization that no matter how hard she tried, she would never belong. The house that had once promised warmth now felt like a tomb of unfinished apologies. Without a word, Claire turned and walked out, the door closing behind her like the end of an era. Holden was waiting outside, his quiet presence grounding her in the chaos. He didn't ask questions, he simply extended his hand, and together they drove away, leaving behind the weight of bloodlines and broken promises. For a fleeting moment, the open road offered freedom, a reprieve from judgment, a chance to forget that she had ever dared to hope for a mother's love. But freedom has a cruel way of exposing what the heart cannot escape. As Claire and Holden traveled from town to town, their laughter often masking the cracks beneath, she could not silence the echo of that moment, Victoria's trembling voice, her tear-filled eyes, the disbelief that turned to rage. She tried to bury it under motion, to let the rhythm of the highway erase the image of the will, but guilt clung to her like shadow. Meanwhile, back in Genoa City, Victoria's certainty began to crumble. The rage that had driven her dissipated into confusion. Something about the letter gnawed at her. The language, the phrasing, they were wrong. Cole's words had always carried warmth, even in reprimand, yet this document read like a verdict written by someone who barely knew him. Alone in her office, she examined it again, this time not as a widow, but as an executive accustomed to deception. The paper felt off, too new, the ink slightly smeared, the seal inconsistent. A dreadful realization began to take shape. She had been played. Someone had sent her a forgery, a cruel piece of theater designed to destroy what little healing she and Claire had achieved. The discovery struck her harder than any slap could. The guilt that followed was unbearable. Victoria, the woman who had survived corporate warfare, family betrayals, and public scandals, now found herself broken not by her enemies but by her own failure as a mother. The image of Claire's tears haunted her, she saw them in every reflection, heard them in every quiet moment. For the first time, the fierce Newman pride that had defined her felt like poison. She had allowed grief to make her blind, to turn her love into a weapon. The realization that Cole's will was forged became both a revelation and a curse. Someone had orchestrated this, not for money, but for vengeance. Someone wanted her to destroy her own daughter. The question of who lingered like smoke in her mind. It could have been anyone, a rival, a jealous relative, or even someone from Claire's past who sought to ensure that she never found peace. But the motive was too personal, too cruel to be random. It was as if the saboteur knew that Victoria's greatest weakness was not her power, but her heart. As the days passed, her need to find Claire consumed her. She called every contact, searched every town they might have passed through, leaving desperate messages that went unanswered. Sleep became impossible. Even the familiar comfort of her father's advice could not soothe her. Victor's stoic reassurances only made her feel smaller, as though her pain were trivial in the grand scheme of the Newman Empire. But this wasn't business, it was blood, and she couldn't delegate forgiveness. For Claire, the journey with Holden was a fragile escape that slowly began to fracture under the weight of her unresolved pain. Holden saw the change in her eyes, the way her laughter faded too quickly, the moments when she stared out the window with the kind of longing that had nothing to do with him. He wanted to help her heal, but how could he mend a wound carved by family? Claire was trying to be strong, but inside, she was unraveling. She had spent so long proving that she was no longer the manipulated pawn of her grandmother's schemes that being accused again, this time by her own mother, felt like proof that redemption was an illusion. Every time she thought of Victoria's hand, she didn't feel anger, she felt shame, the kind that seeps into the soul and convinces you that love is something you must earn, but will never deserve. Then, one evening, as they passed through a quiet town outside Madison, she saw a headline on a cafe television: "Forgery exposed in Newman family scandal, will declared fake." Her heart stopped. The image on the screen showed Victoria leaving Newman Tower, her eyes red, her expression broken. The truth was out. Someone had forged Cole's signature and sent the document directly to her, using an address from his old estate records. The police had opened an investigation, but the damage had already been done. Claire turned away from the screen, her mind spinning between relief and devastation. She wanted to believe that this revelation could undo the pain, but forgiveness was not as simple as truth. She thought of the way Victoria had looked at her in that moment, not as a daughter, but as a stranger who had taken something precious. How do you erase that? How do you go back to the moment before the slap, before the accusation, before everything broke? Victoria's desperation grew with every passing hour. When she finally tracked Claire down, it wasn't as the powerful executive the world knew, but as a mother stripped of pride, her voice trembling with the weight of regret. The reunion was not dramatic, there were no grand gestures, no declarations of love, only silence, heavy and uncertain. Victoria's tears came first, raw and unrestrained, her words tumbling out like confessions to a God she didn't believe would forgive her. She spoke of the letter, the deception, the blind rage that had made her lash out. She begged for understanding, for a chance to make things right. But forgiveness is a fragile thing, and Claire's heart had been wounded too deeply to yield easily. She wanted to believe her mother, to embrace the truth and let it heal them both, but every instinct screamed for caution. The world had taught her that love could be a weapon, and she was no longer willing to bleed for it. Still, beneath her guarded expression, a flicker of hope remained. She saw in Victoria's eyes not manipulation, but genuine remorse, the kind that couldn't be faked, not even by a Newman. The road to healing would be long, littered with mistrust and old ghosts, but for the first time, it seemed possible. Yet the question lingered, who had done this? Who had forged Cole's will and set this tragedy in motion? The mystery loomed like a storm cloud, hinting that their reconciliation might only be the calm before another reckoning. Genoa City was a city built on secrets, and in a world where power and family were currency, truth was the most dangerous weapon of all. And so, as mother and daughter stood beneath the same roof once more, each haunted by their own reflections, the air was thick with uncertainty. Victoria had learned that love, no matter how fierce, could destroy as easily as it could redeem. Claire had learned that forgiveness was not weakness, but a choice that demanded courage. Whether they would find peace or fall apart again depended not on fate, but on the next shadow waiting to emerge, the unseen hand that had written a false will, torn a family apart, and proven once again that in Genoa City, even the dead could reach out and rearrange the living. Victoria had never known silence to feel so suffocating. It followed her through every corridor of the Newman estate, echoing in the space where her daughter's voice used to be. She had made the call dozens of times, each one unanswered, each ring a reminder of the distance she herself had created. Claire wanted nothing to do with her now, that much was clear. The young woman had drawn a line of fire between them, and every attempt Victoria made to cross it was met with cold rejection. Claire had said it plainly before vanishing from the mansion. She did not want to hear another word, another apology, another tear-soaked justification. She had been humiliated, insulted, and made to feel like a fraud in a house that had promised to be her home. The wound wasn't just emotional, it was existential. To be accused of not being someone's child, after spending months trying to build an identity from ashes, was to have the ground torn out from beneath her feet. Victoria understood that now, but understanding came too late. The forged will had done its damage, slicing through their fragile bond like a knife. The irony was that Victoria had finally discovered the truth. The document was fake, a carefully constructed piece of sabotage sent through the mail with Cole's forged signature. Every forensic trace pointed to manipulation, to deliberate intent. Someone wanted this fracture, someone wanted mother and daughter to tear each other apart. But even that revelation brought no peace, because now another question loomed like a ghost over every sleepless night: was Claire truly her daughter? The doubt gnawed at her relentlessly, whispering that maybe, just maybe, the will had been forged not to lie, but to provoke the search for a deeper truth. Why hadn't she tested it? Why hadn't she ordered a DNA confirmation long ago, when she first embraced the possibility that Claire was her child? Pride, denial, fear, all of them had played their part. Victoria had wanted to believe that love could be enough, that the bond she felt was proof in itself. But now she saw that her refusal to confirm it had left room for the serpent to strike. If she had taken that simple step, she might have saved them both. The weight of that realization broke her more than any public scandal could. For Claire, the anger had calcified into something darker. She replayed that slap over and over, not because of the pain, but because of what it symbolized: rejection. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's expression, twisted with disbelief and disgust, and it poisoned every memory they had shared. The apology that came later meant nothing. It was a hollow echo that couldn't rewrite what had been said and done. Claire had built her life on fragile hope, on the belief that she could be more than the sum of her mistakes, and in one brutal moment, that hope had been annihilated. She ignored the phone calls, blocked the messages, and buried herself in distraction. Holden tried to comfort her, reminding her that people made mistakes when they were hurt, but she wasn't ready to listen. It wasn't about forgiveness, not yet. It was about dignity. Claire felt stripped of it, reduced once again to the role of the outsider, the imposter, the unwanted reminder of the past. Meanwhile, Victoria's world continued to unravel. The discovery of the forged will led to questions that rippled through every corner of Genoa City. Who had sent it? Who had gained from their estrangement? Victor, ever the patriarch, demanded answers, hiring investigators and threatening retribution against whoever dared attack the family. But Victoria didn't care about vengeance. She cared only about one thing: getting her daughter back. Yet even as she planned to reach out again, a strange hesitation gripped her. What if the DNA results confirmed her worst fear? What if Claire truly wasn't her biological child? Would that change how she felt? The thought terrified her. She had spent months rebuilding a bond that transcended genetics, finding in Claire a reflection of her younger self, headstrong, wounded, desperate to be loved. If science invalidated that connection, would her heart still recognize her as her daughter? Or would it shatter again, this time beyond repair? The rational part of her knew that testing was the only way forward, the only way to silence the whispers. But emotion made her cowardly. Each time she picked up the phone to schedule the test, she found an excuse to delay. It wasn't the result she feared, it was the confirmation that she had failed as a mother, regardless of biology. Even if Claire was hers by blood, she had still driven her away by not trusting her. And if she wasn't, then every moment of love, every attempt at reconciliation, would feel like a cruel joke played by fate. So she waited, caught between paralysis and guilt, hoping time might soften what pride had broken. Claire, for her part, was making plans of her own. She needed to regain control, to reclaim the narrative of her life before it consumed her. She began considering a move, perhaps to Paris or London, anywhere that wasn't Genoa City, anywhere that didn't echo with Newman ghosts. She had talent, intelligence, and ambition. She refused to let her pain define her. Holden supported her, though he worried that she was running rather than healing. He saw the storm behind her calm facade, the way her eyes darkened when she mentioned Victoria's name. But he also knew that Claire was right about one thing: she needed distance. Genoa City had become a trap of old sins and inherited guilt. If she stayed, she would forever be measured against the Newmans' expectations and her grandmother Jordan's crimes. She needed a clean slate, and yet, part of her heart still lingered behind. For all her anger, she couldn't entirely sever the bond. Victoria's voice still haunted her dreams, calling her by the name that once made her feel whole. Back in the mansion, Victoria stood at the window, watching the snow drift across the frozen grounds, her reflection blurred by the glass. She had faced corporate battles that would break lesser people, but this private ruin, was something else. The empire she had built meant nothing if she couldn't rebuild the trust of one person who mattered most. She thought of her own childhood, of the endless war between love and control that defined every Newman generation. She had sworn never to repeat her parents' mistakes, yet here she was, perpetuating the same cycle, letting pride destroy what love had mended. Maybe the DNA test was the only way to restore balance, to face the truth without fear. She made the call that evening, her voice steady but hollow, arranging the test with quiet resolve. But even as she did, she knew that proof could only heal so much. The damage was emotional, not genetic. No strand of DNA could rebuild trust once shattered. Weeks passed before the results arrived, sealed in an envelope no heavier than paper but weighted with unbearable consequence. Victoria held it in her trembling hands, staring at her name printed across the front. She could open it and know everything, or she could destroy it and live with the ambiguity that, for all its pain, still allowed hope to breathe. For a long moment, she did nothing. The past and future seemed to converge in that instant, and she realized that no matter what the envelope contained, the outcome would not absolve her. She had already crossed the line that separated truth from trust. The only thing that could save her now was Claire's forgiveness, and forgiveness could not be forced. When Claire finally agreed to meet her months later, it was not out of obligation, but exhaustion. The anger had burned itself into ash, leaving behind only questions. They met at a quiet cafe, the air between them fragile but less hostile. Victoria's first words were an apology, not rehearsed, not strategic, just raw. She told Claire that she had discovered the will was fake, that she had never stopped believing in her, and that no matter what science said, she would always be her daughter. Claire listened in silence, her expression unreadable. The distance between them was not just physical, it was the space created by too many unspoken wounds. When Victoria asked for forgiveness, Claire hesitated. She wanted to say yes, to release them both from this endless spiral of pain, but part of her still bled. Forgiveness felt too easy, too unearned. She told her mother she needed time, and this time, Victoria didn't beg. She simply nodded, understanding that love meant waiting. As they parted, something unspoken shifted. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was the first step toward it, a quiet acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, the bond between them was stronger than the lies that tried to break it. Whether Claire was her biological daughter or not no longer mattered, what mattered was that she had chosen her. But as both women walked away in opposite directions, neither noticed the figure watching from across the street, the same person who had sent the forged will, the same shadow that had wanted them divided. The game was not over, it had only just begun. And somewhere in the depths of Genoa City, the next move was already being planned, one that would test just how much love and blood could withstand when the truth finally demanded to be known.